It's a crossover edition. Locked on Hawkeyes, Locked on Badgers. Myself, Trent Condon, and Ryan Harings as we talk the world of the old Big Ten West. It is different days, no doubt, and we're going to get into it. The battle for the Bull, Iowa versus Wisconsin. Certainly one of my favorite games each and every year, Ryan. I grew up in North Iowa, had family in Madison growing up, went to this game many times as a youngster, and in the 80s, well, it was really good. Through the 90s, it was really good until the end. And then by the time I was in college, it went disastrous. We've turned it back into a rivalry here these last couple of decades. Good to talk to you again this year. Ryan, how you doing?
Man, I am great. Are you kidding me? It's Iowa-Wisconsin week. Let's fire up. I love it. I love this matchup. I love this game. And we were talking before the show. It feels like we're both kind of back to where we've been, which is 5-3-ish. Like not really battling for anything really. But like really a fun game. I can't wait for it. I love it. And outside of the fact that you guys now score points and we run an air raid, everything feels the same. Right? Aside from doing differences from the last couple of years.
It really is odd, and Iowa's turned into an over wagon now. They have hit the over in the point total in every game but one so far this season, completely opposite of what was a year ago, where Iowa week after week after week was hitting these historic lows in terms of the point total that you can find at FanDuel. Not the case this year. They're scoring points. Now, it's not all offense, and it's certainly not the passing game, but we'll talk about that as we dive into this matchup a little bit more. Ryan, first, I want to get your perspective as we sit here. We did this a year ago as Iowa, Wisconsin were getting ready to face off a little bit earlier in the season, a couple of weeks earlier when that was. You guys came in at 4-1. Iowa had just lost Cade McNamara. We saw Deacon Hill, who of course you guys knew, and I felt like Iowa had no chance. You felt like Iowa had no chance, and I still hear today from some of my buddies about that one. Deacon didn't do much. It was one long play and a great defensive effort from Iowa that day that pulled out the victory. But now that momentum that you guys maybe had early in the season looked like it was starting to come back. I don't want to say it came crashing down with that loss to Penn State because we're talking about an undefeated top 5 team, but just in general, where would you say this Wisconsin fan base is? You're number 2 of Fickle and Company and what the program, Phil Longo running the offense, where the temperature is of Badger Nation.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it honestly probably depends on who you ask. There's certainly some people who are still a little salty, a little frustrated about losing Paul Chryst. Felt like he should have had a longer leash given his track record. And then 2 years in, though, that contingent of Badger fans will tell you, well, doesn't seem that much better with Luke Fickell. I would say the majority of Badger fans, though, are still pretty on board with Luke Fickell, what he's done, what he's building. Recruiting has gotten much better, more dynamic. And the patience is required, is where I'm at. Like, you can't shift so much from a culture that had been established and etched out of granite for 2 decades. And in a year and a half, it clicks, right? So I think this year we've started to see some stuff come together. The vision is looking like we want it to look like on defense. They've gotten some more athletes at linebacker. It's not the traditional Wisconsin defense of the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years that Jim Leonard and Dave Aranda, those guys orchestrated. It's not that good, but we're starting to see things come together there. And then offensively, it's been a lack of cohesion, a lack of consistency. Now, I would also point out, like, sometimes sports, and much like life, are just unfair. For the second year in a row, Phil Longo has lost his starting quarterback to injury. Last year was Tanner Mordecai. This year it's Tyler Van Dyke. It's hard, right, when you're playing with your number 2 guy for the second straight year and you're playing against a really tough schedule. To your point, it looked like Wisconsin had started figuring some things out. They had that 3-game stretch against Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers where they basically rolled all of them to different degrees. And then they had a home game against Penn State. It felt like throughout that game, I was there. I was in Madison. It felt like throughout that game, Penn State was slowly taking more and more control of it, but it was still 14-13 going into the fourth quarter. So I wouldn't say momentum has completely shifted away. That's a really good team. They're better than Wisconsin. There was some disappointment in the way it got away at the end, which is similar to the way the game against USC got away in the end. So there are Badger fans that are getting frustrated about, hey, win the big game. You got enough of the progress, enough of the moral victories. You got to win the big game. And to me, Iowa's a big game. Like, you go into Kinnick and you beat Iowa. It's not beating Penn State on defeated Penn State, but that's a big game. And that's what this program, this fan base, I think this coaching staff is leaning into. This is maybe their last realistic shot this season to get a quote unquote kind of signature victory. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question in terms of temperature, but I think most Badger fans are cautiously optimistic still. And it's just taking a little longer than they had hoped.
Well, and I look at you guys in your closing stretch that you have after this one, Oregon at Nebraska, Minnesota. Of course, the Oregon game's Oregon, the number one team in the country, and both those final two games are losable. I don't think the
Mhm.
Gophers are great by any means, but they've shown a propensity to play at least okay. And of course, we know Nebraska. We saw when they show up and do what they do defensively a week ago against the Buckeyes, just how good that team can be. And Royola is going to be a guy, and there's going to be his moments that he's going to make here. You lose this one, and all of a sudden you're looking at that 3-game gauntlet at the end from a Wisconsin perspective. And I'd say, boy, look out here because you know how things get and you know how ugly things can get. That losing
Mhm.
streak continues. We're in year number 2, and we end the year losing even 3 out of 4, something like that down the stretch. It's going to get negative in a hurry, and it's a lot of losing, something you guys aren't used to over the last quarter century plus.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and that this is a huge game for both programs. They're both sitting at 5-3, but the Badgers' schedule this year has just been a bear, right? Wisconsin has played Penn State, they had Alabama, they had USC in the Coliseum early when USC was playing a little better. They're going to have Oregon still. Like this game is so important to the Badgers because if you win this, I think you can paint yourself a picture where they finish with 7 or 8 wins. They're going to drop Oregon, but I think they can beat Minnesota, Nebraska if you can get this game in Kinnick. And for Iowa, this feels like a springboard to getting to 8 or 9 wins. If you can beat Wisconsin, like suddenly that path opens up to 8 or 9. I think it's a huge moment for both teams, really. Looking down the stretch of the season, what can we end up with as a win-loss record? This is kind of a crossroad moment for both these programs. And I want to kind of shift it to you on that one. Crossroad moment for both these programs, crossroad moment for the quarterback room a little bit, right? We
Yeah.
saw Sullivan come in last week and look great, like led 4 straight scoring drives. Brendan Sullivan, the former Northwestern quarterback, obviously Badger fans are familiar with him, more athletic. I think he plays much better with Kaleb, just the ability to do some more RPOs where he can actually cause the defense some havoc, some stress. That's an area the Badgers defense has had some issues with. What do you expect to see week 2 of Sullivan? Because there is an element of now there's a week of film. The Badgers are going to be a little more prepared for that element of the game.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. And with the running quarterback, it is going to kind of flip this Iowa offense on its head and what it is. Now, I continue to hear going back to practice in August that the gap between McNamara as a thrower and Sullivan was pretty significant. It wasn't a small gap, it was significant. The problem was that Cade McNamara was struggling himself. And in games throughout the course of this year, he was struggling making some very simple throws even before the injury. The concussion he sustained last week against Northwestern made a big play, nearly overthrew it. It took a diving grab to get it up the middle of the field. If you would have thrown it on the spot, it would have been a touchdown. Then had Seth Anderson again in the end zone and overthrows it out of bounds and missed. So he was out of sorts throughout the course of this one. Brendan Sullivan's always been accurate. It's not a whole lot of deep shots down the field, but accuracy really hasn't been a major problem for him. And then you add this running component to it. Kaleb Johnson said it after the game, the second leading rusher in the country. He said, you know what? It's pretty good having a guy out there like this. And Brendan Sullivan's been a part of the team ever since the debacle against Iowa State in week 2 when they had the ball 3 times, overall would have been 7 times inside the 3-yard line and got 2 field goals out of it and lost by a point. They've developed this package inside the 10-yard line for him. So he's been playing ever since then. And he's been out there in those inside the 10-yard line situations. So he's got plenty of experience now. It's just going to be, can they open up the playbook? Can there be more in the passing game for Brendan Sullivan? I think that's what all of us are kind of waiting for here. You mentioned that kind of crossroads moment, and given the Badger kind of perspective of what we're seeing here for the Hawkeyes, this was supposed to be the year. They returned a ton of guys back, a lot of 6-year guys. They used their NIL money instead of going out in the transfer portal. No, they used that to get those guys to come back for another year. Guys that it would have been 4th, 5th, 6th round draft picks. No, we're going to spend the money, keep these guys around for another season. And Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, guys that are all Big Ten honorees in the past. We're going to bring them back. The schedule set up incredibly well. Your tough matchups. Well, Washington. We see Washington is certainly not the team that played for a national title a year ago. And short of the road trip to Ohio State, it was a manageable schedule. Yet they're out of it. They already have 3 losses. There will be no college football playoff. The hope was this team could get to 10-2, maybe sneak in the back door of the college football playoff because the schedule becomes a bear. Not going to be the case. And with it, as you guys certainly remember, up there in Wisconsin, an aging coach and a lot of questions, and that's what's happening down here right now with Iowa. Let's get into the matchup here coming up on Saturday. We'll break things down. Ryan and Trent with you. Locked on Badgers, Locked on Hawkeyes. It's a crossover edition. We dive into the game, what we expect to see on Saturday. Stay right there as we continue. Locked on. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Having that information there, seeing if your eyes actually match up with the numbers, incredibly important when you're jumping in live. And of course, you can bet college football as well. Iowa, Wisconsin, that thing's been bouncing back and forth just around a field goal, 3.5, depending on what time you're shopping on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Get started with FanDuel and visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Trent and Ryan back with you once again. Locked on Hawkeyes, Locked on Badgers, crossover edition as we look forward to the Battle of the Bull, the Heartland Trophy. The Heartland Trophy, couldn't we come up with a better name than that? I know this is a new trophy. This is not, something that dates back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, but the Heartland Trophy, I don't know. I love the Heartland, but come on.
I kind of like it actually. Maybe it's just compared to other trophies they've shoehorned into us.
Sure.
Like Wisconsin,
yeah, you've dealt with that a lot. Yeah.
The Freedom Trophy. I mean,
Right.
that's an AI generated thing. So
Yeah.
I actually don't mind the Heartland Trophy. And the actual trophy itself looks good with the bowl. Like
Yes.
I'm good with it. By the way, I feel like I should just have you come on every time to do my ad reads. That was way easier and nicer. Like I don't have to stress it or
Just
deal
sit
with
back.
it. I
Just
can
sit
figure
back.
something out. Yeah, let's do it.
That works a lot better, right?
Let's talk to the game because I actually really want to ask you specifically, what did Michigan State do outside of one big run? Was there anything schematically they did to stop Kaleb Johnson? It was just one big 74-ish yard run, and outside of that, it felt like they had him locked up.
They really did a good job of crashing hard. And the thing that more than anything that I saw, and it was really surprising because Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator for Iowa, he's done a really nice job of mixing in a few counter plays, doing some things to the outside, even showing jet sweep motion, and every once in a while giving it to the guy. There was none of that against Michigan State. It was such an odd game plan. And they were behind the sticks. McNamara was 3 of 9 in the first half of that game. They're playing from behind. And he played a lot better in the second half of the game, at least throwing the football. But more than anything, that's what it was. They didn't have any counterpunch at all. Nothing that they could do. And Michigan State was charged up. I mean, they were run blitzing seemingly every single time, and McNamara couldn't make them pay. So they're able to keep doing it time in and time out. So I think more than anything, that was what it was. But you mentioned outside of the 75-yarder, that's something that Kaleb Johnson does. And you'll see him even going back last week against Northwestern. Northwestern did very similar. In fact, his only runs of double figures, more than 10 yards a week ago, were his 3 touchdown runs. And they went for 23, 30, and 30 and 40, something like that. That's what he does. He is a big play back. And it just takes a small crease. You look at him, he's angular. He's kind of a bigger running back. Dude is fast. So I tell this story all the time. His freshman year, his first game, we had a lightning delay. Game didn't end until like 1:30 against Nevada. He's playing late in the game, has a long touchdown, and looks like he's played an overmatched opponent, right? And then it had one of those, I see one of those Twitter accounts that measures their miles per hour. It was the second fastest in college football in the season, a couple weeks into the season. We're talking about a freshman at the time that was 18. He doesn't look as fast as he is because he's a long strider. And there's so many defensive backs that think they have an angle on him. No, they don't. They miss the angle because of the speed that he doesn't look like he has, and he absolutely does. So you're going to see that from Kaleb Johnson. He's done it every single game. He even did it against Ohio State, though it was late in the game. So he's going to have a big one in there. I think the big thing for Wisconsin is those plays. Instead of letting him make it a 2nd and 4, is it a 2nd and 8? There's not much
Mhm.
there, but he falls forward for a couple. Those are going to be the things because Iowa, I believe, with Sullivan is not going to be built in a way nobody can play from behind the sticks, right? 2nd and 12 is death, but it's even more death for Iowa football.
It's really interesting to me here, and for Badger fans who haven't seen Kaleb Johnson run, like, you're in for a treat. Like, he is a bigger guy, but he finds holes really well, and he's fast, he's physical, he's awesome. I think I saw averaging right now 7.84 yards per carry, I think is what it's up to, down to. That's an absurd number for the workload he gets. He's really, really good. And it's always fun to see really great players. I think the interesting matchup here, or the obvious matchup here, sometimes we tend to make things so complicated. I think it's just literally who's going to run the ball better. Like,
Yeah.
Wisconsin wants to run the ball because Braden Locke, much like Sullivan and or McNamara or whoever Iowa, Deacon last year, it doesn't matter. Insert Iowa quarterback, but also insert Wisconsin quarterback. It doesn't matter. Neither of these teams are set up to throw the ball consistently if they don't have that running game complementing them, that running game putting them in second four, and more importantly, that running game drawing a safety into the box. And that's what both of these teams need. And the Badgers, started the year with a 3-back carousel. Iowa fans probably remember Ches Malusi. He stepped away after 4 weeks after the USC game. And Tywee Walker has really emerged as the bell cow. Pretty good back. I would call him he's definitely a hammer. Big load, runs with great leverage. Does not have the deep speed. He's not that guy who's going to break a 50, 60, 70-yarder, but he's going to run physical. He's going to be a tough interior challenge for the Iowa front seven. And then they complement it with a freshman they really like, Darren Dupree. But ultimately, again, it's who's going to win the line of scrimmage in this game on both sides. And the team that's more able to run the ball is going to step their passing game. And I think that's the team that wins. And it's possible maybe both teams are able to do it somewhat consistently, and we get a higher scoring game than Wisconsin Iowa traditionally has been. And I could see that path happening as well.
So, very simply for me, it comes down to turnovers. I said it a week ago, as I loved Wisconsin last week. I loved them getting the points on the FanDuel app. I was jumping aboard. I was putting all kinds of money on them. But I said it very simply. I said, if Braden Locke doesn't turn it over, they don't cover. They win the football game. And I still believe that. He turned it over, and of course, they lose and don't cover on top of it. Go back to last year. What happened? Wisconsin turned it over twice. They outgained them.
Mhm.
They had double the first downs in the game, 18-9. Iowa, 0 turnovers. Wisconsin, 2. And 1 big play. The difference is that. Now, this Iowa offense is more dynamic. I'm going to hope that Brendan Sullivan does not go, 6 of 14 for 37 yards like Big Deke did a year ago for the Hawkeyes. I think they're going to get a little bit more out of the passing game. Speaking of that, though, I want to throw this by you, Ryan, because I'm sure it's probably flying under the radar a little bit, just how dire things are in the Iowa quarterback room right now. Cade McNamara was not back at practice as of Tuesday. In fact, he went to the quarterback group meeting and had to leave because he had a concussion and the lights were too much, the fluorescent lights, and he had to leave that one. So the likelihood that he's going to be able to play this weekend incredibly low. The backup quarterback to him, Marco Lionez, again, that played a little bit at the end of the bowl game a year ago. Athletic guy, can run around. Not a great thrower right now. He had an injury last week in practice. He hurt his hand. Doesn't sound like he's going to be available this week. So the only other quarterback that was on the roster that's a scholarship quarterback, well, he's no longer a quarterback. James Rezar, the freshman that they brought in this year from Florida, they've already moved him to wide receiver, and he got hurt on top of it, so he can't even be practicing right now at the quarterback position. You're looking at a walk-on, Jackson Stratton, as the backup this weekend. He played 2 years ago at Colorado State. He went a Deacon Hill-like 4 of 17 with 2 interceptions in his appearance with Colorado State. And if it's not him, it is a defensive back walk-on that played quarterback in high school. That is what I was looking at. I do wonder, long way of saying, we know Brendan Sullivan, his strength is his legs, but with what's behind him, if McNamara isn't available even in a backup role this weekend, does that mean that they have to, hey, we got to throttle it down here? We can't use those zone read comp sets. You can't be running around and making plays because we can't afford you to get hurt. Maybe that falls in line there and certainly helps the Wisconsin perspective.
That's wild. It reminds me of, was it 6, 7 years ago when Maryland lost their top 4 quarterbacks and they were
Play
down
the
to
linebacker? Yeah.
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 It's kind of wild because there have been calls for Braden Locke. No, Braden Locke is not the athlete Sullivan is. But obviously, Braden Locke is the number 2. Behind Braden Locke, the Badgers have a true freshman, maybe Mentor. They like him, but he's a true freshman. They're not ready to throw him into the bullet. There's been calls from Badger fans about, man, Braden Locke on some of these RPOs, because Wisconsin, Phil Longo, he also wants to use RPO action. If you're an Iowa fan and you're used to 20 years of Wisconsin football and you somehow slept through last year, you're not going to recognize what you see. It's going to be shotgun. It's going to be 3 wide, 4 wide. And he still uses tight ends. He still wants to run the ball, but he wants the RPO action, and Locke very rarely keeps it. So the end crashes down backside, blows a lot of plays up. But the Badgers also don't really want Locke running, because even in a place where you get 5, because if he gets hurt, it's a true freshman coming in. So similar, although it's a bigger part of Sullivan's game, which to me is interesting. They're obviously going to have to limit some of those hits, but they're still gonna have to pick and choose, because if you don't let him run, then you might as well not have Sullivan play, right? Like that's kind of what he does to some degree. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how they're going to manage that one exactly. Any other big injuries for Iowa or anything else where you guys are down a body or two where I would feel better about my Wisconsin bet, perhaps?
So a couple of different things that have cropped up here recently, and it's funny. About 3 weeks ago, Kirk Ferentz, in about as atypical a fashion for Kirk Ferentz as possible, he said, this is as healthy as we've ever been. Oh, Kirk. Oh, no, no, no. And apparently he pissed off the football gods, because since then, the injuries have continued to pile up since then. A couple of big ones. Now, Bo Stevens, the starting guard for them, he is anticipated that he's going to be back this week in a full-time capacity. Probably not, though. They've been rotating a couple of guys over there, including a redshirt freshman in Cade Pieper, who's a little bit undersized at the guard position. So that's one to keep an eye on if Stevens is out there. John Nestor, he came in, got his first extensive action at Michigan State at cornerback, and he looked awful. We found out why. He was hurt, and he didn't play last week. He was out. He's going to be out again this week. Probably the biggest thing, though, is the tight end position. You guys obviously know the importance of tight ends. We know the importance of tight ends. Not just Addison Estrenga, the number 2, who plays a ton because of the way that Iowa plays. He's been out for a couple of weeks. He's going to be out again. Luke Lachey got banged up. They said he could have came back if an emergency arose against Northwestern, but as they were blowing out the Wildcats, it didn't matter. Sounds like he's pretty touch and go. So all of a sudden, Iowa goes from down to the certainly top 15 tight ends in the Big Ten, and now you lose both of those guys potentially if Lachey can't go, or he's limited this week. It kind of gets scary in a hurry in the way that Iowa wants to play, because we're not talking about a program that, we'll just go 3 wide every single time. That's not a strength, certainly, of this Iowa football team. And with what they want to do in the running game, again, you throw another component in there. I would anticipate Hayden Large would be the guy who is a fullback for them, but he wears a number in the 80s. He was playing D2 football. Just a crazy story. His name's Hayden, but he's not named after Hayden Fry. Just all kinds of craziness with this kid's background there. He'll be out there in a blocking role, but you're not going to see any dynamic plays, I don't think, in the passing game out of the tight ends with what they have there. So, yeah, kind of a walking wounded. How about the Badgers? Is this, you mentioned Lucy step away. There's been a few others, obviously, Van Dyke being out. Anything else a little bit deeper down to the roster we should know about?
No, honestly, the Badgers are actually really healthy for this point of the year. And again,
Need Fickle to talk about it then. Can Fickle talk about it?
I'm finding something to knock on some voodoo doll to break up or whatever. But they're actually, again, all things considered, again, you lose your starting quarterback. How lucky can you really be? But for the most part, the offensive line's healthy. They are down Bryson Green, who's one of their starting receivers, but not the type of guy that you're going to build a game plan around. The running backs are pretty healthy. The defensive line lost a guy right before the year that would have been the best defensive lineman on the team, but that was before the season. They've been really healthy. Nothing I can really point to that says, man, this just happened, and I don't know how the Badgers are going to fill that void. So, yeah, I mean, the football injury gods have shined relatively brightly on the Badgers since the Tyler Van Dyke injury, which obviously is a big one, but since then they've been pretty lucky, which is so much of football, right? It's luck. It's you step the wrong way, you get rolled up the wrong way. It sucks, but it is what it is.
All right, Ryan, we're going to get into our predictions, what we anticipate we're going to see on Saturday on the field. Night game, and always a fun one at Kinnick Stadium when that one happens. Plus, I got to ask you what's happened with basketball. I got a question for you on the Badgers. We'll talk a little Big Ten hoops to wrap things up and make our predictions. We continue. This is a crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Badgers. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime. Look, It was incredible watching Iowa pull away. And how about that big return by Caden Weechen? 85 yards and put the game on ice. Those big moments, Hawkeye fans, you're looking for your fan fuel for the week. When that moment comes, be ready with it with 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. That's 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. Trent Condon alongside Ryan Harings back with you one final time here on the crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Badgers. I got to ask you, I just saw this from, was it Club Trillier, that the guy on Twitter that has all the box scores. So I'm a Tavern Hawk. I went to Iowa for 2 years, transferred to UNI. That's where my degree's from. Dual fan, if you will. My Panthers got the Badgers in the exhibition game. Is that true?
Well, in the secret scrimmage, they actually played another. The Badgers just played one today against UW River Falls. I didn't see what happened in the UNI one, but listen, I'm guessing that they're not a secret powerhouse this year. I'm guessing that
they're picked second in the MVC, so they should be pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not exactly what you want to see, right? Not exactly how you want to lead off the season, right? The leadoff hitter, that's not what it is. I love basketball, though. I love hoops. I was watching their scrimmage today against UW River Falls. I've been looking at their Big Ten squads. Iowa, lots of shooting. It looks like if I'm looking at the Iowa team, it looks like shooting everywhere. Some really talented players, man. So, I can't wait. I love the center you guys got. A big kind of physical guy with Freeman. Yeah, Owen Freeman. Like, I like him a lot. He feels like he might be one of the best centers in the Big Ten. And obviously, Sanford is legit good. So I can't wait, man. The Badgers have a bunch of new pieces. And one thing I've said on my show, this is going to be a bit of a test for Greg Gard in the NIL era. How well can he reload and replace via transfer portal? Because that's a lot of what he has to do this offseason.
18-team league is going to be weird. You guys seemingly all the time find a way to finish up there and be a tournament team. I mean, is that the bare minimum this year? Be an NCAA tournament team? Is that the expectation? At least the baseline for I'm sure it is every year for Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, like it's got to be. Like that's got to be. And Iowa's got to be there too. Like you have to set the expectation to make the tournament. Badger fans are very split on Greg Gard. Like he was a 5 seed. He was a 5 seed last year, and you would not think it based on the conversations I have. Now he also got bounced in round 1 as a 5 seed, and pretty convincingly. So you can't backslide. Like there's a certain level of expectation at Wisconsin, and that expectation is have a good team year in and year out, run a clean program, get to the tournament. And I think Iowa falls along a lot of those same lines as well, like consistent success over there as well.
Yeah, and a year ago they were on the bubble on the wrong side of it. Had an opportunity. They finished up with Illinois and then played Illinois again, and got bounced both games in the Big Ten tournament, the regular season finale. If they would have won one of those games and both those games, they would have been a tournament team. And that was the first time they missed the tournament in 6 years, which from what Iowa was and kind of the crater they fell into under the Licklider era, they'd have at least pulled themselves out of that. All Iowa fans now are hoping for is to get to the second weekend. In fact, speaking of my college days, that was the last time it happened. 1999, spring of 1999, my freshman year in Iowa City was the last time that Iowa made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. It's been a long drought, and that's what people are waiting for there. But we got a long time before basketball. Let's get together during basketball season. But let's talk football to wrap it up, Ryan. Prediction time coming into Kinnick Stadium, Kinnick under the lights, and I saw today that I was going to go with the All Blacks. Worked pretty well the last time Bucky came to town. What do you see on Saturday night?
First of all, Iowa's uniforms are amazing. I'm not just saying that because you're here. People that I talked to, I was talking to people last weekend because I think Penn State is the most overrated uniforms in college football.
Oh,
it looks like it's the most. It's just me. Like I know people are like, it's so pure. No, it's like a white helmet. It's like someone didn't finish an art project. I think it's ridiculous. And if they weren't a blue blood, no, they look like a MAC school.
Yeah.
Iowa, meanwhile, I love the colors. I love everything about that look. It's an iconic helmet. It's also unique. It's clean. It's not too busy. And then with the All Blacks under the lights, Kinnick, that's going to be an incredible thing. I do think Iowa wins. I think it's like a 26-23 game. I think it's close. I just think they've proven that they have a little bit more offensive identity than the Badgers do. I'm more confident that they can run the ball versus us than us against y'all. And I think that's the key to the game. Like I said, and then also you mentioned turnovers. I'm not confident Braden Locke makes it through a game without throwing a turnover or throwing a pick because he hasn't yet. It's been his bugaboo. He throws too many picks. He fumbles in the pocket. If you can get a clean Braden Locke game, I think the Badgers can absolutely win this game. But we haven't seen him do that. And at some point, people tell you who they are.
24-20, Iowa. Under the lights, I think the defense is going to be a little too much. You mentioned that Michigan State game. Iowa missed 19 tackles in the game. They'd never lost in the Pro Football Focus era the last 5 years, anything close to that. The high water mark was 13. They missed 19 tackles in the game. They cleaned that up a week ago, and I'm sure practice was not very fun. Charged up atmosphere, the excitement of Brendan Sullivan. So many people had checked out on Cade McNamara. I think that's going to create even more buzz in here. And I just don't see enough, speaking of counter punches that we talked about earlier, I don't see enough counter punches from Wisconsin outside of what they can do on the ground game in this one. As he said, I think there's going to be a few more points than people would be anticipating in an Iowa-Wisconsin game, but I got eventually Iowa pulling it out 24-20, the final for me. Iowa gets the win, the cover, and another over as the overtrain continues for the Hawkeyes this season. Boy, if that does happen, Ryan, going to be some, I'm sure, difficult conversations with Oregon looming up next for you guys.
Oh gosh, I don't want any part of that game. Although listen, come game week, I will find a path to victory. I will find the reason they could trip them up. Yeah, like listen, I it's just a tough battle, man. You go into Kinnick. Wisconsin does have a couple weapons on the outside. Vinny Anthony is a really fast boundary receiver who's made some plays this year. Maybe they can get something there. But yeah, I just think it's tough against Iowa. And I think they have a more proven identity on offense right now. So I'm looking forward to it, man. This has been awesome. Second year in a row we've been able to get together and do this. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a good game. I do think Iowa's going to win, but we'll see.
One final thing. Iowa has had some trouble in that second cornerback spot. You speak of a speedy guy. I was giving up more long touchdowns this year than any season, certainly of recent past. We'll leave with that. We are out of time. Ryan Harings, you can find him on Twitter, X at Ryan and Bucky. And of course, Locked On Badgers. You can find myself, Trent Condon, at Trent Condon, and Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us for this crossover edition, and make sure to check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig Sheeman always doing a great job in putting the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Hit subscribe if you're watching either side here. Locked On Badgers, Locked On Hawkeyes. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks and
on Wisconsin,
Badgers.
Baby. Let's go.
On Wisconsin. There it is. See you guys.